Good morning, it's Friday the 27th of December. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here at ARIRANG's news centre in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Korea and China strongly protest Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's controversial war shrine visit. The US says it's disappointed as Tokyo's latest move will further escalate tensions in Northeast Asia. Overnight talks between the state-run rail operator and the rail union end without much progress. The nationwide strike is now into its 19th day. Plus, the Korean government lays out its economic goals for 2014. It expects growth of just under 4% next year, up from 2.8% growth estimated this year. And we begin with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's controversial visit to a war shrine that honours Japan's war dead, including several Class A war criminals. His surprise move has infuriated Japan's neighbours, including Korea, which has lodged a strong complaint. Han Dan reports.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe marked the anniversary of his first year in office by visiting the Yasukuni War Shrine in Tokyo on Thursday morning. It's the first time a sitting prime minister has visited the controversial site since Junichiro Koizumi's visit in 2006. The Yasukuni Shrine honors 2.5 million Japanese war dead, including some convicted war criminals. Abe had previously steered clear of the shrine for fear of further damaging regional ties, choosing instead to send donations. But the possibility of a visit has always lingered due to the Prime Minister's strong nationalism and hawkish foreign policies. Abe told reporters on his way out that he was paying respects to those who sacrificed their lives for Japan and that he had no intention of upsetting the people of Korea or China. He added that he hoped to have a chance to explain his actions to the leaders of both neighboring countries. Korea's Culture Minister Yoo Jin-yong called Abe's behavior anachronistic.
The Korean government can't help but express deep regret and anger over Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit, defying concerns from neighboring countries. The Yasukuni Shrine harbors war criminals and eulogizes Japan's imperialism.
Yu added Japan should acknowledge its past wrongdoing and build trust with its neighbors, starting with a sincere apology. Korean Vice Foreign Minister Kim Gyu-hyun summoned Takashi Kurai, the deputy chief of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, to relay Seoul's concerns. Han Dan, ARIRANG News.
The Japanese leader's visit to the war shrine has also drawn criticism from China and the United States. In a statement Thursday, the US Embassy in Tokyo said that while Washington considers Japan a valued ally and friend, it was disappointed Japan's leadership took an action that will exacerbate tensions in the region. China slammed Abe's visit, saying the action makes it that much more difficult to improve bilateral relations and that Japan must take responsibility for all the consequences that this creates. China's ambassador to Tokyo met an official at Japan's foreign ministry on Thursday to lodge a strong protest. Moving to the nationwide rail strike in South Korea now that is into its 19th day. Working level talks between the state-run railway operator and the railway union to resolve the strike failed to make much progress overnight. In a press briefing Friday morning, KORAIL CEO Cheon-hae said she regretted striking workers could not understand KORAIL's move to innovate and improve itself. She added that KORAIL aims to foster internal competition by setting up a subsidiary to manage a new high-speed rail line out of Seoul, which is what sparked the strike on December 9th. Che asked striking workers to come back by midnight Friday, adding that KORAIL will take disciplinary action on those not coming back. In a separate press conference shortly after, railway union leader Kim Young-hwan said all striking workers would return to work if the government stops the approval of a license for the new subsidiary. Kim says the union is still open to talks and that dialogue is the only way to resolve the deadlock. The Korean government says it wants the private sector to play a leading role in spurring economic growth. Next year, the government expects the Korean economy to expand by 3.9% in 2014, up from an estimated 2.8% for this year. Hwang Jie has the details.
Boosting domestic demand, job creation, and reforming the public sector. Those are the main economic objectives of the Korean government for 2014. Unveiling its economic policies for next year on Friday, the government pledged to promote investment and consumption by fostering the nation's service sector and providing tax breaks for small and medium-sized businesses. The government says while many ordinary people could not feel the benefits from record exports this year, increased domestic activities next year will improve their livelihoods. To keep up with the momentum of recovery, fiscal spending will be front-loaded in the first half of the year. The government will place an emphasis on job creation in 2014 when it expects some 450,000 new jobs to be created. The government in particular will step up efforts to boost employment among young people and women. It'll set up a venture capital fund only for young entrepreneurs and offer incentives to create more flexible part-time jobs for female workers seeking to juggle work and home life. Also high up on the government's priority list will be debt reduction for state-run companies and public organizations and so-called economic democratization, calling for a more equitable distribution of wealth and the reining in of family-controlled conglomerates that now dominate the industrial landscape. If things pan out as the government plans, the domestic economy will grow 3.9% next year, higher than the International Monetary Fund's forecast of 3.6%. A rise in domestic demand, however, is expected to narrow the nation's current account surplus to $49 billion next year from $70 billion this year. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
Korean consumers remained confident in December, although they appear to have some doubts about certain aspects of the economy. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that its consumer sentiment index came in at 107 for December, unchanged from the previous month when it hit an almost three-year high. The index is a barometer of consumer outlook on the economy, with a reading above 100, meaning that optimists outnumber pessimists. Consumers seemed hesitant, however, when it came to the outlook for the next 6 months. That figure dropped 1 point from November, and the one measuring their general outlook for the economy in the future fell by 2 points. The Korean government has unveiled a long-term plan to develop cutting-edge materials and parts aimed at bringing about scientific advances in a range of fields. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said Thursday that it will develop 200 promising materials and parts by 2025 through financial support from the government and cooperation in the academic and industrial sectors. Two of the most noteworthy materials and parts on the list are aerometal, an ultralight metal material, and solar paint, which is able to convert sunlight into energy. The government also hopes to create mobile devices that do not need to be recharged, as well as new technologies for treating various brain diseases. A ministry official said the global market for the top 30% of materials and parts on the list will be worth around $1 trillion by 2025. Recent economic data shows that Korean steelmakers are likely to suffer from declining profits in 2013, with exports for steel-related products falling for the first time in 4 years. But the new year brings new hope, as local firms hope to turn things around by establishing key partnerships in overseas markets. Paul Lee reports.
This past week, the first blast furnace was ignited at a new steel plant in Indonesia, representing a landmark project between Korea and the Southeast Asian country. The grand opening comes 3 years after Korean steelmaker POSCO launched a joint venture with Indonesia's state-owned Krakatau Steel.
We will help them to perform. We will help them to produce more, and we're willing to take a sizable amount of slab, which is produced by Krakatau POSCO. So this is again a very important milestone.
The $3 billion plant is the Korean steel giant's largest overseas project yet, with annual production estimated to reach 3 million tons.
We are proactively entering and contributing to Indonesia's industrial development. Gaining a foothold in the Indonesian market is very important because it gives us a foothold in the whole Southeast Asian market.
It's just one part of POSCO's strategy to expand its global reach amid a saturated domestic market. The Korean firm is currently building another integrated steel mill in Brazil that is set to begin operations in 2015. The move would tap into the world's largest supply of iron ore, as well as help smaller Korean companies break into the Latin American market.
As demand in the global and domestic market quickly recovers, the most important ability producers will need to develop will be absorbing this demand using existing steel production facilities.
Despite a lackluster year for local steelmakers, Korea's heavy industry titans plan to accelerate their overseas investment and expansion. The idea is to keep moving in order to survive the current economic slowdown and ensure they catch the next wave of worldwide growth. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
At the National Assembly, rival political parties are hurrying to pass a number of key pending bills before the end of the year, including next year's budget bill as well as a spy agency reform bill. Our political correspondent Kim Yeon-ji reports on the last-minute push.
The National Assembly is operating with a new sense of urgency as it aims to pass a number of bills before the year's end. Some are approved on Thursday in a full assembly session, including a special bill aimed at giving more financial support to small-sized firms so they can grow bigger and more competitive. The ruling and opposition party leaders of a special parliamentary committee to reform the National Intelligence Service continued to hash out the details Thursday, one day after the rival parties agreed to pass the 2014 budget bill and a NIS reform plan this coming Monday. The Christmas Day deal, however, did not include an agreement on other key legislation. The Saenuri Party demanded the main opposition party help pass bills that seek to facilitate foreign investment and tourism in the country. President Park called for their passage earlier this month, saying they are necessary to revive the sluggish economy and provide momentum for a recovery. The Democratic Party, however, called for prohibiting efforts to privatize the state-run rail operator, KORAIL, asking that it be put into law. The 7,600-member railroad union has been striking for nearly 3 weeks in protest of the government setting up a subsidiary company that will run a new high-speed train line from southeast of Seoul to the southern port city of Busan. The railroad union says the move is part of the government's plan to eventually privatize national rail services. The government says it has no intention of doing so. While the rival parties failed to reach a consensus over these issues Wednesday, they are continuing discussions about the bills in the respective standing committees. As for next year's budget bill, the rival parties have cleared the way for about 2/3 of 120 government business projects that are pending, most of them pertaining to job creation and the creative economy. Kim Yeon-ji, ARIRANG News.
Prosecutors are demanding the former head of the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency, Kim Yong-pan, be sentenced to 4 years in prison for obstructing a police investigation into allegations the nation's intelligence agency meddled in last year's presidential election. At the Seoul Central District Court on Thursday, prosecutors said he should be sentenced to 2 years on charges of violating election law and an additional 2 years for abusing his authority. Kim was indicted in June for ordering his subordinates to reduce the scale of the special parliamentary probe into the scandal surrounding the National Intelligence Service. He'll be sentenced on February 6th. The South Korean government is downplaying the most recent criticisms of President Park Geun-hye to come out of Pyongyang, responding to North Korea's remarks, calling on the president to choose between trust and confrontation. Seoul's unification ministry says it's the North's behavior that will decide which path the South will take. The ministry adds Pyongyang's remarks were likely to made to distract its people from internal instability stemming from the execution of Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-taek. The ministry's announcement comes a day after Pyongyang's committee in charge of inter-Korean relations said the Park administration's North Korea policy was no different from former President Lee Myung-bak's hardline policy. Environmental pollution is one of the biggest challenges facing our world, but the city of Ulsan, a centre for Korea's auto and oil industries, has shown that even a heavy polluting metropolis can go green. Now, Kim Min-ji walks us through the city's eco-friendly transformation.
Ulsan, Korea's 7th largest metropolitan city, is home to one of the world's largest industrial complexes. Originally a fishing port, the southeastern region is now an industrial powerhouse for the nation's leading vehicle factories, shipyards, and oil refineries. The rapid industrialization that began in the 1960s has prompted major heavy and petrochemical companies to invest in the region, but it's come at a high cost to the environment. In order to address these environmental issues, the city of Ulsan established an eco-police force back in 2004. The goal was to launch 110 eco-friendly projects across the city as part of efforts to balance industry and nature. Well, nearly 10 years later, Ulsan has made tremendous strides to realize that sustainable future. More efficient industrial facilities have cut emissions of sulfur dioxide, while expanded sewage treatment plants have significantly reduced the level of pollutants in the Taehwa River. Other milestones by the Eco Initiative include growing city park areas to 4 times their size compared to a decade ago. The local government says it's an accomplishment made possible by residents coming together to improve their city.
At its source was the establishment of a comprehensive environmental plan. Businesses, citizens, and environmental groups, one by one over the 10 years, worked consistently to build these planned facilities and systems.
Ulsan City is counting the success it's had cleaning up the air and water as part of its mission to build a global green industrial city that everyone can enjoy. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
The United Nations has once again called on rival forces in crisis-hit South Sudan to lay down their arms. The plea came Thursday as South Sudan's President Salva Kiir met the presidents of Kenya and Ethiopia in an attempt to defuse the intensifying conflict. Clashes were first reported 11 days ago between forces loyal to the president and those backing his ex-vice president Riek Machar. The UN Special Representative has called on the two warring factions to give peace a chance, saying the nation that was painstakingly built over decades of conflict is at stake. The South Sudan government says rebels have seized some oil wells and captured half of the capital of the main oil-producing region. The sprawling corruption scandal in Turkey is unraveling fast. The Turkish government has now relieved the investigating prosecutor of his duties after he complained that his efforts were being blocked by the police. 3 ministers had resigned after their sons were among dozens of people detained last week as part of a probe into allegations of illegal money transfers to Iran and bribery for construction projects. Under fire Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan is battening down the hatches, replacing half his cabinet with loyalists. One of Erdogan's closest allies has called the investigation a foreign orchestrated plot without legal merit. The Thai government has rejected calls to delay upcoming elections in February, which the Prime Minister announced earlier in the hope of diffusing anti-government protests, saying a postponement would be unconstitutional. The country's Deputy Prime Minister said an election must be held within 60 days of parliamentary dissolution. Thailand's election watchdog had called for the postponement of February's general election for an unspecified period of time due to bloody clashes between police and anti-government protesters. One policeman was killed and nearly 100 wounded on Thursday as tear gas was fired by police against rock-throwing protesters who were trying to break into the venue of an election ballot where numbers were being drawn.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with some domestic football. Now, with the year almost coming to an end, one footballer was voted as the Korean Footballer of the Year. Now, with 2,776 online votes coming in, Lee Chung-young of the Bolton Wanderers received 49.3% of the votes and was named the 2013 Player of the Year. The midfielder came back from a huge leg injury and helped Korea qualify for the World Cup. Meanwhile, Son Heung-min finished second in the voting, with K-League Classics MVP Kim Shin-wook coming in second. Now, fans have also voted the recent Korea-Switzerland friendly as the match of the year. And staying with football, the future of Korean football gets brighter and brighter as 15-year-old Lee Seung-woo continues to shine with the Barcelona youth team. And it turns out he'll be playing with the team for another 5 years. Lee Seung-woo is nicknamed Little Messi, has signed a 5-year extension with Barcelona that will keep him with the club until he's 20. By staying with the club, this striker has a chance to make the A-team as well, hoping to continue his success going into the 2017 U20 World Cup in Korea, followed by the 2018 World Cup. Now, several English teams were after the young talent before deciding to stay in Spain. Now, more from the pitch, as this time sources say that Dejan Damjanovic of FC Seoul has agreed to sign with Jiangsu Sainty of China's Super League. Now, the striker had one of the most prolific career with the FC Seoul since joining the team back in 2007. Now, the team is set to make some major changes going into next season, as Molina seems to be headed out of the team as well. All right, so with that said, moving on to some Thursday night's KBL action. We had one game take place last night as the Goyang Orions took on the struggling Wonju Dongbu Promi. Now, first quarter of the game, 7 different Dongbu players scoring in the quarter as Dongbu takes a 25-17 lead after the first quarter before going into halftime with a comfortable 44-37 lead. The Orions trying to rally back in this game as Kim Dong-wook will put up game-high 20 points in the game, but Dongbu continues to press hard as they hang on to take this game 89-79. And now finishing things off, let's take a look at Urikard take on Russian Cash over on Thursday night's V-League action. Now an easy win for Urikard, right? Wrong. First set, the game goes to deuce before Russian Cash capitalizes on some mistakes, taking the first set 26-24. Second set, Urikard's Kim Jung-hwan makes crucial errors here, leading to Russian Cash taking the second set with ease, 25-18. Urikard never recovers from the 0-2 deficit as Arpet Baroti and Song Myung-gun combine for 32 points on the night as Russian Cash take the third set as well, 25-18 and a 3-0 upset victory. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your Sports News.
Time now to check in on the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. And that's all for now. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and we'll be back again for our next newscast coming up at noon Korea time.